Hi, I'm Julie, and I had a heart transplant about 23 years ago, and I thought I'd share a little bit about my experience with you. It was actually 23 years ago this month that I had gotten a sinus infection, and I was on antibiotics, and it didn't get any better, and it went from a sinus infection to bronchitis to pneumonia within 3 weeks. And I had spent many times going back and forth to the ER trying to get IV medicines to help me, but I kept getting sicker until finally Thanksgiving weekend of 1993. I ended up very sick in the hospital and I had a hard time breathing, and the doctor still believed I had pneumonia. So they had admitted me that night, and that night when I stayed, I thought it was going to be, a few nights in the hospital, I'll get better, some IV medication, and it didn't work out that way. I am married, and at that time I had a daughter who was 2.5 years old. And the night that they admitted me on Thanksgiving weekend, I remember telling my husband that to go home and get some sleep, and I'll be here a few days, and then I'll get better, and I'll be home before you know it. And unfortunately, that night, after he and my daughter left, I went into cardiac arrest. And I remember that night very well because I was eating a popsicle because I wanted something cold. I had been wanting cold things like ice and popsicles. For some reason, it helped me, and there was so much pressure on my back and my chest from the fluid building up in my lungs. So the popsicles and the ice always felt good. So at that time, I was eating a popsicle, and I was in a room by myself. And I can remember as I was eating the popsicle, it was getting harder to get air. I couldn't breathe very well. And so I remember pressing the nurse's button, hoping somebody would get into the room quickly. And that didn't happen. And at that time, I could feel I was suffocating. It actual felt like suffocation or suffocating. It's a feeling I can't describe very well. It's just a horrible feeling, and you never forget it once it happens. And I can remember being on the floor just trying to get air, and at that time I remember a nurse coming in, and that was the last thing I remember. I do remember hearing her calling code blue, and that was it. The next thing I remember, I woke up in an ICU unit, and I had tubes everywhere on me, and they had inserted a blue balloon pump in my heart. And at that time, the doctors had told me that it had been a week since I coded, and that my heart was badly damaged, and that they believed that I had some kind of virus that attacked my heart. So what had happened was whatever virus attacked my heart was basically suffocating the heart. The fluid that had backed up in my lungs that they at that time thought it was pneumonia was actually my heart getting weaker and weaker and more damaged from the virus. And so so it caused the fluid to back up in my lungs and was basically suffocating the heart and drowning the heart. And that's what had happened to me the night that I coded. And so here I am a week later. I missed a week. Probably a good thing that I didn't know what had happened. And I'm in an ICU unit with my whole world just changed, my whole life changed in front of me. And my only concern at that time was my 2.5-year-old at home. And when am I going to get to go home, and when am I going to get to be with her, and what's going to happen next. The doctors at that time weren't sure if medications could help me get better, or if I would need to go on the transplant list for a heart transplant. After many tests and a long period of time in the hospital, they had decided that my heart was too badly damaged, and I would have to be on the heart transplant list, which I still didn't understand the magnitude of all this, what was happening. My only concern at that time was getting home and being with my daughter. And so after stabilizing me enough, after a few weeks, I finally got to go home. I was very, very weak, and I was in a wheelchair at that time because I couldn't hardly walk. And I was in a hospital bed downstairs in our home. And as time went on, I ended up on oxygen everywhere I went, which was basically to the medical centers and back and forth, checking into the hospital for a few days, staying a few nights, and coming home. And Christmas came of 1993, and it was very hard. It was a very hard Christmas. My grandmother was also ailing, and we weren't sure how much longer she would be around. And between my grandmother not doing well and me not doing well, it was a very stressful time on our family, and having a 2.5-year-old who had a lot of energy and really needed her mom, and I really needed her. So I think we were kind of there for each other, getting us through everything. A day or two after Christmas, my body was failing. I was very, very sick, very, very weak, and I struggled to breathe because my heart was just so badly damaged. It was struggling to keep going, and with all the medications and the very special diet that they had me on, because they were so worried about too many liquids affecting my heart, so you had to be very careful what you ate and how much you drank, and of water or juices or anything. So when a couple days after Christmas, I could tell my body was fading. I could actually feel it. And I ended up back in the hospital, and they admitted me right into the ICU unit. I remember being wheeled down into that room, and that was the last time I was in there, from that time for 7 months. So when I was admitted that day, I ended up spending 7 months in the hospital in isolation. Thankfully, they were able to find me a heart. It took about 3 weeks. So January 21st of 1994, I received a heart from a wonderful person that I have never been able to meet their family, but I am so very thankful that I got to receive a heart, that this wonderful family gave me a chance to be able to watch my daughter grow up and be with my family. And that's something the words thank you are not enough, because that is a really special thing to do for somebody. And the family of the donor that was just so caring enough to give someone else another chance at life, and it means more than they'll ever know. I ended up on life support waiting for my heart. It was a very close call. I was at the weekend. I received my heart on a Friday. The night before, my husband was in the room with me. I don't remember anything at all, which was a good thing. When you're on life support, usually everything's shutting down. My organs were shutting down. My husband said I looked very, very gray. And every time he left that night, when he'd say goodbye, he wasn't sure if he'd see me again. So finally, the 21st of January, on Friday morning, he received a phone call in the middle of the night after a few hours after he had left me at the hospital. He received a phone call, and they said, "We think we found a heart." And my husband had told me this story later. He said his response was, "Great, what do I do?" And the doctor said, "Well, go back to sleep." And he said, "And we'll call and let you know if it's a match." So another hour goes by, and he gets a phone call. "Hey, well, we think it's a match, so we're good to go. We're going to go get the heart, and we're going to get all the team together and do the surgery." My husband says, "Great, what do I do?" And the doctor says, "Go get some sleep, and we'll call you when it's time for you to come down here when it gets closer to the surgery." Well, this is about 4 in the morning, and my husband couldn't go back to sleep, so he decided to head to the hospital and wait. And I received my heart, and when I got out of the operating room and they were wheeling me back to my room, my husband was on the unit where my room was. When they were wheeling me off the elevator, he said when I went by, he goes, "You were pink." He goes, "You were very pink," because my heart was working. I had a heart that was moving the oxygen and blood flow through correctly, so I looked healthier, I looked better, and that was a really good thing for him to see. I think it was probably a week or 2 weeks before I was really coherent and understood what had happened. I was so very sick, and being on life support for so long, my body had atrophied, and also on life support, I had some mini strokes. And so when I woke up, when I was aware of what was going on, maybe that's a better way of saying it, because they had me on a ventilator and a lot of tubes when I came out, and I don't remember any of it. But when I was aware of what was going on, it'd probably been a couple of weeks, and the first thing I remembered is waking up in this room, and I really didn't know what happened to me at all. And it was very scary, because it was night, and the room was dark, and I'm in this room with nobody in there, and I couldn't move, I couldn't turn my head, I couldn't lift my arms or my legs, and I really did not know what happened to me. And so a nurse had come in at that time. I had my own nurse. She kept coming in to check on me. So when she saw when I was awake, she told me everything that had happened. And I said to her, "I can't turn my head. I can't move anything." And she said, "That's because of the atrophy." And I could hardly speak. I had lost a lot of my speech and my ability to put words together. So between the atrophy and the mini strokes, I had to learn how to use all my muscles again. I had to learn how to use words again. I had to learn all over, and that was a struggle. That was a real challenge. Not being able to feed myself was a very difficult thing, and so a lot of physical therapy, a lot of patience, and a lot of work. I was able to finally swing my legs out of bed one day, and I stood up, and that was a great first step for me. About 2 weeks after transplant, I went back in for another surgery. I had a pulmonary embolism in my left lung, and that was due to the fact of my heart failing when I was on life support. I had blood clots because when your heart is failing, you can get blood clots throughout your body. And so that's what happened to me. And one of them lodged in my lower left lobe, which was a pulmonary embolism. So as soon as I was strong enough in transplant, they decided to take me back in and remove half of my left lung. So when I come back out, and I'm awake, a few days later, I'm aware of what's going on. And I have more tubes coming out of my chest cavity and the abdominal area. And I have to say, that was actually more painful. I actually remember coming out of the lung surgery more than the heart transplant, because the lung surgery just seemed to be more painful. I don't know if it's because of how the surgery was or what happened. But that was quite a challenge to deal with that on top of everything else. So I still was working to get my strength back and use my muscles and my words. I also had problems with my vision. I was not seeing very well at the time. I had big yellow blotches. Actually, that came from when I first woke up after transplant. And that was probably due to medicines and possibly from when my body was failing. But now I'm doing better. As time went on, I was doing better and starting to get stronger. And then I got a virus, which is actually a virus that comes with the antibody from a transplant heart. Everybody has the antibody. It just sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't when you have a transplant. And so I had to deal with that. That was a very serious virus. I had 104 temperature for 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, what they said. I was very sick and couldn't keep anything down. Ended up on a feeding tube, and I also had different lines that were always put in me for blood work because my veins had failed. And so they had inserted a new line every week that went up through my arm and into the neck area. And one time when they have to change it every week so you don't get infection. And so one of the times when they went to change the line, they nicked the top lobe of my lung. So I ended up with another tube in my lung, and I ended up actually between my lung surgery and this happening, I ended up with a tube in both lungs and lived with those for quite a while in the hospital. Time went on and I was getting stronger and better, and a lot of challenges in the hospital, a lot of challenges with my medical situation there, and nothing was easy, but there were many days that I just didn't know if I was going to get through that day. I have a lot of faith. I believe in the Lord, and I have a lot of faith that He just will get me through. But there were times I just got so down and discouraged I wasn't sure. And so my pastor, who's also my friend, would visit me almost every day. And he had told me when we were talking one day, I told him, I just don't know if I can get through another day. And he said, he said, Julie, focus on getting through the next hour or the next minute. Don't worry about the next day. Just worry about that minute. Just think about trying to get through that minute. If you can get through that minute, then focus on the next minute. And I took that advice, and it really helped me. It got me through. And I thank Him for that, because I relied on that again in my future when more challenges happened. And being in the hospital was a very difficult and challenging thing. I didn't get to see my daughter. I think I got to see her twice. They brought her up to the window. I was in an ICU, all-glass room. It was isolated. I couldn't be around anybody because they were afraid of any germs being brought into me. I had no immune system, and so I couldn't fight anything. And so anyone who came in to see me had to scrub up and wear a gown and a mask and gloves, so you always felt like a little science specimen in a petri dish or something, because everything had to be so sterile. So a lot of challenges in the hospital. I look back at that time in the hospital, and it just feels like a whole nother lifetime ago. And if someone told me that that was ahead of me in my life, I don't know how I would have dealt with that. But I have to say my faith carried me through. My wonderful family, their love and support got me through. And I have a wonderful church, and all their prayers got me through, and their support and their love. And it was a long 7 months in the hospital, and a lot of hard days and hours, and many tests and many procedures and many things to overcome and start your life all over again. I met a lot of wonderful people through it. I was there 7 months of my life, and what I didn't know is that was just the beginning. Some of my life had to change from there. I've had to be careful about a lot of things. I'm careful about what I eat. I make sure I do exactly what the doctors say, and I do my tests, and I take my medicines on time. I take medicines for life. I have tests for life. I have heart biopsies for life, and echocardiograms for life, and that's fine, because if that's what we need to do, if that's what the doctors need to do to keep me going, then I'll do that. It's a small price to pay to be able to be a part of life and watch my daughter grow up. And I'm so very thankful, because every day I wake up and I'm here and I get to experience my daughter's life and be with my husband and my friends and family. And I wouldn't miss that for anything. And I'm just so very, very thankful. None of this has been easy. And I have just stayed as focused as I can on just enjoying what I can with my family and my friends and my church. And I think when I first found out I needed a heart transplant, I still never really understood the magnitude of what was happening to me. But I knew it was serious, and I just couldn't stop thinking about how much I needed to be with my daughter. And for that reason, I think that helped keep me fighting and not giving up. But you would think that would be the end of the many challenges that would happen to me medically in my life, but unfortunately it wasn't. I got to go home, like I said, 7 months later, and I still spent another year or two trying to recover. And it was about 2 years before I could drive again. And there's a lot of physical limitations. I just learned to work with them. You just don't let it get you down, and think about I'm not going to let this get the best of me. I have two choices. I'm either going to roll over and give up and complain and not try, or I'm going to fight this, and I'm going to get stronger, and I'm going to do what I need to do to get better. And that's what I chose to do. I chose not to let this take over and run my life. I may have had a heart transplant, but my name is Julie, and I had a heart transplant. I'm not the heart transplant patient. And that's the difference between fighting something and overcoming it and trying to work with it and get through, or just giving up and become the problem or this challenge that's happened. So more challenges have happened in my life, and we just took it head on. It wasn't easy, and it was scary. I watched my daughter grow up. She got into high school, and she herself had some serious medical challenges, very serious medical problems that she too had to deal with. And I really thought that our family was done dealing with all this medical, but we were not, unfortunately. So we had a choice. We either deal with it and make the best of it, or we give up. And we chose to deal with it and make the best of it. One of the things that's really helped us through everything is we kind of laugh about a lot of it. We kind of find humor in anything that we can, because if you don't, it'll just get you down. And there's a lot of great people out there to meet, and there's a lot of great people who just need somebody who understands what they're going through. So when my daughter was going through her medical problems, things that she still deals with off and on, she got very sick, and about 3 years into her dealing with her serious medical, which to me was far worse than anything I've ever been through. When it's your child, I found out I had cancer, and I ended up having stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And at this point, I had my heart 16 years. And when I first found out, I was in the hospital, and I honestly couldn't understand how this could happen. One more thing in our lives. So while my daughter was very sick and in a wheelchair and blind, I'm finding out I had cancer. And my first reaction was not, this is it. My first reaction was, I was mad and I was upset because how could this happen? And I was questioning God, how could this happen? And it was something that I really had to work through, but I knew He was there, and again, I relied on my faith, and my church family was there for me, and many more prayers and love and support, and my own family and friends. And we all got through it. Everybody got me through it, because what we went through was teamwork. It wasn't just me, it wasn't just the doctors, but it was teamwork. With my doctors, my family, my friends, my church, my faith that I have in the Lord, I know He's number one in this. And that's what got me through. And there's, many days, many hours, I really wasn't sure. I really wasn't, but I was not going to give up. I'm stubborn, and I wasn't going to let any of this win. I spent almost 3 years battling cancer. And I spent a lot of time sick with the different chemos that they had me on, and I was on different treatments. And I had chemo and I had radiation, and they were preparing me for stem cell collection, for stem cell transplant, which is kind of ironic considering I had a heart transplant. But they were gonna end up, their plan was to do stem cell transplant with my own stem cells. So they started collecting stem cells once I went into remission. A lot of months trying to do this because I just was so weak that they were having a hard time collecting stem cells. So when they finally got enough, I'd been in remission almost 6 months, and they decided that my body was so weakened that they would just watch me and keep watching me. And if I just stayed in remission, I wasn't going to have the stem cell transplant. Well, here I am. I'm going on 5 years. In 2017, I'll be 5 years in remission, and I didn't have a stem cell transplant. So for that, I'm very thankful, because that was just another hard road. And the whole experience has been a challenge. And no matter what has happened, no matter what has been sent our way, I don't understand it, and it's been very hard, but we've met a lot of wonderful people, and I still wouldn't, I wish I'd never had medical problems for me and my daughter in our lives, but I'm very thankful to be here, and I just know that the thing that I'm not someone who can just give up, and I can't quit, and I don't know what else to say other than that's summarizing my medical experiences, and there's a lot more to it, but I think that was the best way I could summarize it. But again, like I said, we always try to find as much humor in everything that we can. That really helps us get through everything. That plays a big part in it. And sometimes when things get so hard and you get so down, and you feel like you're just being dumped on, like you're becoming this big mountain of everything dumping on you, and I don't know, somewhere down the road, something just gets better. You just can't give up. I just know I just held on. I just held on with maybe being stubborn with my faith and the fact I was not going to give up missing my little girl grow up. To this day, she's a young adult, and I still don't want to miss out on her life. So it's important to me to just keep fighting and do everything I need to do every day. And it's not always easy, but then life's not supposed to be easy, I guess, because it makes us stronger. And that's really about that's about the best way to sum all this up. So thank you for listening, and I just hope that maybe something in my story might help you too. Thank you.